I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. I have on the founder and creator. He does tireless work at geoengineeringwatch.org. It's everything you want to know about solar radiation management, geoengineering, commonly referred to as chemtrails. It's the slang, I guess. Dane Wigington, thank you for joining us from your Northern California home with the fires raging in your state, not close by at your house at this point, but you're coming to us from Northern California. The fires you're telling me that the fires have actually lowered the temperatures, and I just pulled this up. This is not from your site. I got this on my own. Smoke from wildfires has cooling effect on water temperatures. And if you notice here, this is the U.S. Forest Service Pacific Southwest Research Station. This is the official fires lower temperatures. Some of the temperatures lowered are by 10 degrees in some of the reports. This is, again, not from your site. This is just reports that are out there. But you're saying, have told me in the pre-interview, that this is the point of these wildfires, to lower the temperature around the world. Talk about that.
I want to be careful what we state. Here's what we stated at geoengineeringwatch.org. We know that from science study, and we've recently published a report, 22-minute video report to prove this, that wildfires smoke in northern latitude forests has specifically been named as in a manner that would consider them to have a desirable cooling effect on the Arctic. Now, what we can say also about the fires, the intensity, the conditions that have allowed these fires to do what they have done are absolutely a result of climate engineering. That's without question. In regard to the Western North American region that has been on fire, this includes British Columbia, we can see with NASA satellite imagery the blanket aerosol grid pattern spraying going on over the eastern Pacific, which is the ocean off the North American west coast, every single day. This disrupts the storm track. This ensures moisture will not flow into the North American continent. So we can say with absolute certainty that the reason that these areas are so droughted out, so much of a lack of precipitation, is a direct result of climate engineering. We can say that absolutely conclusively.
Now, this isn't the global warming thing. You know, it's funny, the Jerry Browns of the world will talk about climate change and global warming. They'll never talk about high altitude aerosol spraying, which was talked about by John Brennan at the, I don't know, one of the big meetings he had in Washington. I want to say it's at the Council on Foreign Relations or somewhere like that. A public statement. I have it on tape. I think you also have it on tape. You know, it's a real thing, solar radiation, high altitude solar radiation management and geoengineering and all that. But none of the weather people, none of the politicians will talk about us being sprayed with heavy metals so we can reflect the sun. Nobody will talk about that. Talk about that.
Actually, we just taped an ABC meteorologist, and we posted this on Facebook. We're going to post it on YouTube soon as well. An ABC meteorologist that said geoengineering is legitimate, it's real, but the chemicals are not dangerous. And when we posted that, he completely retracted his statements. Not that kept us from posting what he stated. So we'll post it on YouTube, but
which is a lie. They're heavy metals and aluminum particles and heavy metal particles. That's a lie.
For the sake of your audience, we know that one of the primary elements in climate engineering patents and what's showing up in lab tests is aluminum. Aluminum, barium, strontium. But in the case of aluminum, let's look at peer-reviewed science study that we now have that states definitively that without aluminum in the equation, there would be no Alzheimer's in the normal human lifespan of 100 years. Alzheimer's and dementia is the #1 cause of death in the UK, #1. And we believe it's near that point in the US, but it's not being reported. 1 out of 3 seniors in the US officially dies with Alzheimer's or dementia. It's epidemic. We know these materials are in the air column. We have lab tests from all over the globe. The materials match the climate engineering patents exactly. And for example, Greg, in the Western US, people always leap to the conclusion it must be coming from China. We have California Air Resource Board studies on the aerosols from China. Aluminum is not amongst those aerosols because it can't migrate that far. Only mercury can because it converts to a gaseous state. So the bottom line is those carrying out the climate engineering have absolutely no regard for the consequences of what they're doing. Or in fact, we can carry this further, Greg. The fact that the society is getting literally less cognitively functional by the day, and that's a statistical fact. IQs in the U.S. that we do have reporting on precipitously dropping 6 to 9 points. That's an astounding drop in IQ levels. We're not getting any smarter. And Greg, the fact that we're inhaling these particulates is incredibly harmful. And I want to stress this: most people know aluminum is harmful, so they're worried about aluminum in deodorants and cooking utensils and so forth. Inhaled aluminum is exponentially more harmful, and we are absolutely, all of us, inhaling these particulates. Our lab tests prove it.
And back to the fires aren't just happening. If you just watch the news report, you think, well, just fires are just happening in California. But your reporting says, oh, no, there's fires all over the globe. Tell me about that.
Let's look at the facts. This summer, we had state of emergency in British Columbia with nearly 600 wildfires. We had similar circumstances in Alaska, Canada, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Siberia. We look at these massive fires, Greg, like the Carr Fire many people remember over summer, or the Camp Fire that just happened. Carr Fire, about 220,000 acres burned. Camp Fire, 140 or 50,000. Siberia, in some recent years, has lost nearly 100 million acres. Nobody reports on that. So we're losing forests all over the globe at an unbelievable rate. And for Greg, you've probably heard the official narrative that this is happening in California because our forests are not managed properly. Did you hear that narrative?
Yes.
Absolute nonsense. And I speak from very direct experience. I've been around forestry issues my whole life. My father was an arborist. I've done 6 major habitat restoration cost share programs, 3 federal, 3 state. I led those programs. I live in the middle of a habitat reserve. I've seen the forest die around me. So let's look at statistical fact. Forests in Siberia that have been untouched for millions of years, in the last 10 years, the burn rate has increased 1,000%. These burn downs have nothing to do, or almost nothing to do, let me rephrase that, with any sort of management, especially when we're talking about forests that have never been touched and are now burning at 10 times the rate they have throughout paleo data. So that narrative is absolutely false.
And you're saying that this is because, the real reason this is because of the climate engineering, the spraying. You're saying that that's the biggest, what you've been saying, you've been very consistent, that the biggest piece of the pie, not all of it, but a biggest piece of the pie that we could help ourselves with is stop the spraying, stop the management of the geoengineering, the weather. Is that what you're saying? It's still a big problem. That's the big problem happening with all these burns, particularly in California.
Yes, and I would challenge people to look at presentations we put out at geoengineeringwatch.org going back many years, like Engineered Drought Target California. We did this presentation many years ago, we said then, many years ago, what is happening now would happen. It had to happen if climate engineering operations continued. Now, I want to state this very clearly. We're not denying anthropogenic forms of damage to the planet. Every form of human activity that affects the energy balance of the planet is a form of geoengineering. That includes cutting down the forest, paving the oceans, poisoning the oceans, paving the planet, so to speak. But in the case of the wildfires, that, as you just correctly stated, absolutely, positively, statistically, the single greatest causal factor absolutely is climate engineering, because otherwise we would have more rain on a warming planet. Statistically, we would have 7% more moisture in the atmosphere for every degree C of warming. It should be raining more. Previous eras in Earth's history, the Pliocene epoch from 5.2 million years ago, carbon counts were significantly higher than they are now. Was the western U.S. burning to the ground? No. The forests were lush and thriving because there was more precipitation and they were trying to uptake this carbon. We don't have that now. Why? Because, as I mentioned earlier, this grid pattern spraying over the oceans, specifically in this case for the North American continent over the Eastern Pacific, absolutely breaks up any storm formation and ensures no moisture will flow into the west. And also, this was another major factor. We have these, Greg, you've heard of these high pressure domes. You've heard of the ridiculously resilient ridge that blocks all the rain over the west. You've heard of that? Probably. So this is a result of ionosphere heaters. These facilities are absolutely verifiably real. Their function is not disputed. By transmitting massively powerful microwave signals into the ionosphere, they can heat it to profound temperatures. It causes an electrical chain reaction. That creates a high pressure heat dome. Why would the climate engineers want to create that? because in the northern hemisphere, that high pressure dome spins clockwise like a flywheel or like a pulley, and that helps to spin or direct the upper level wind currents where they want them. So this is another reason why the rain is being blocked from California, because they're diverting moisture up through Alaska and then back down toward the Gulf Coast, where they pick up more moisture and they chemically ice nucleate it to cool down the eastern U.S., Greg. So you see this profound cool zone on the eastern U.S. with some of the record cold temperatures and a few record snows, right?
Right. Yeah.
What I want to encourage people to understand, these events are absolutely not natural and not reflective of the entire global picture. So last week, as I discussed with you off air, we had snow falling in Louisiana with moisture off the record warm Gulf of Mexico at the same time, on the same day, at midnight on that day. In Eagle Lake, Alaska, the temperatures were 45 degrees at midnight near the Arctic Circle. The eastern U.S. has been consistently a cool down zone by the climate engineers. Why? Because that's the greatest population in the U.S., and by consistently cooling the most populated regions down fuels the division and confusion in the population in regard to the true state of the climate. So that's one of the major aspects of climate engineering. The official purpose is to try to mitigate a warming planet, but we know statistically climate engineering, in exchange for short-term toxic cool-downs using chemical ice-nucleating elements, it actually further fuels the overall warming of the planet. You don't get something for nothing here. So, but we can see over the last decade, the most consistently kept cool region on the planet is the eastern half of the North American continent. That's not an accident, Greg.
These guys are, I mean, they must know what they're doing. I mean, they caused all these fires. You have all these deaths out there, missing people, and billions of dollars in damage. They don't care. They must not care. I mean, I'm not saying that you're accusing them of murder, but I am saying that you are accusing them of setting this up to be this way. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. Again, that we can say definitively, and I will state that on the record. The single greatest causal factor that has set the stage for the epic wildfires is absolutely climate engineering. Why? Let's just outline that very briefly. Cutting off of the hydrological cycle, which I just described. We have an atmosphere that is full of electrically conductive particles that fuels more dry lightning, and it dries out the atmosphere. Geoengineering, because of the aerosol spraying and these particulates in the atmosphere, is destroying the ozone layer. We have unimaginably intense UV radiation now cooking the trees and killing them from the top down. These metals I've described are in the precipitation. They affect the soils, they affect the soil microbes, they affect the root systems, killing the trees from the bottom up. And these incendiaries, or these particulates, are an incendiary dust. They coat foliage, making it burn much more volatilely. From every imaginable direction, climate engineering has absolutely, conclusively set the stage for these unprecedented fires to happen. And Greg, what do we have? The head firefighting people stating on the record now emphatically that they have never seen fires burn like this. And again, going back to the full existence of our site, geoengineeringwatch.org, we have stated this would happen. It had to happen. And back to the forest management lie that this is because of forests not being managed properly. We just had the head of the Professional Firefighters Association state on the record, that's on film and on the record, that narrative, that's why these fires are burning because the forests aren't managed, is absolutely positively false. That's from a 30-year firefighter, head of the Professional Firefighters Association. So again,
it's the geoengineering. That's I've actually seen reports where is this the reason why? I mean, I've seen reports where they're saying, I think you got a piece of video on that, but is this the reason why that the firefighters are like dumbfounded about how intense the fires are, and they're burning in all directions, and they're freaking out and they're not being able to contain this? It's still not contained as we do in this interview. This is far from contained out there in California.
Climate engineering is the single greatest causal factor. For all those environmental groups that are pretending, their hypocrisy is shocking to me. And I mean all these environmental groups from Sierra Club, Greenpeace, WWF, Earth Justice, all of them. Their hypocrisy with not acknowledging the climate engineering issue is absolutely criminal. It's criminal. And why aren't they acknowledging climate engineering? Because they're afraid of losing their 501c3s. Our attorneys have communicated with attorneys from all of these groups They're so fearful of losing their nonprofit status, Greg, that they won't acknowledge the single greatest factor, single most environmentally destructive factor, and again, certainly the greatest factor in regard to the wildfires. They will not acknowledge it. And that denial is absolutely criminal. And in regard to gaining information, with our legal action and our ongoing lawsuit against the Department of Commerce, why would we sue the Department of Commerce? Because the Department of Commerce is the overseeing agency for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA was not releasing their Freedom of Information Act requests to us, which they are required to release. Our lawsuit has forced them to release some, and what do we know from the FOIAs we've already gotten? We know this, that the so-called forecasts, all the way down to the local meteorologist level, is nothing more than a script, and that script is being passed down from the very top, ultimately from Raytheon, private defense contractor Raytheon, who is a geoengineering patent holder involved in the geoengineering programs, and they're passing down the scheduled weather script. And we know this again from our FOIAs. They've stated they want a consistency in message over accuracy. So Raytheon does all the weather modeling for the National Weather Service and NOAA. Don't our scientists, don't government scientists know how to weather model? They have to get it from Raytheon. That's because Raytheon, again, is part of the scheduled weather, the climate engineering operations. And by the way, for your listeners, we've disclosed this, I think, on a previous broadcast, but there is an illegal federal gag order right now on all National Weather Service and NOAA employees. So if I can I want to state this on the record so we don't miss it. The reason geoengineeringwatch.org exists, the reason we're focused on this issue, because mathematically speaking, if all the consequences from climate engineering are considered, it is mathematically the single greatest threat we collectively face short of nuclear cataclysm. So again, it's about priorities. If we don't deal with this issue, Greg, it's affecting every breath we take, the entire web of life. We continue on this course, we are on an unimaginably short time horizon. I stress that as emphatically.
You're talking about the methane gas trapped in the Arctic and Antarctic, North Arctic, Antarctica, South. Are they worried about that?
They're extremely worried about that. You have to look at the climate engineers, their perspective. This is not about the greater good. I want to stress that. Climate engineering is not about the greater good. It's about keeping business as usual, keeping power in the hands of those who already hold it. It's about confusing and dividing the population in regard to the true state of the climate until the last possible moment. So in the attempt to mask the massive Arctic methane thawing and the blowouts that are occurring, and I encourage your listeners to search Siberian methane craters. Just search that, Siberian methane craters. They will be shocked to see what looks like massive bombed out war zones with huge circular craters of methane that are exploding from the tundra. You have to see these pictures to believe it. Why is that so dangerous? Because that methane, as it migrates to up to the upper layers of the atmosphere, methane is from 100 to 120 times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2, and it's not even being discussed openly by the climate science community, not to the degree it should be. It's not included in their modeling either for a reason. They're trying to mask the situation. So climate engineering, in the attempt to try to hide the severity and immediacy of what's unfolding, is actually making it worse, Greg. Just like the pharmaceutical so-called cure for the human body. How many of us have seen the pharmaceutical commercial that claims to treat a certain symptom, but then you hear the side effects and you wonder who in their right mind would take that? Same mentality.
But to make this is not a California story. These wildfires are not simply so people in Missouri or people in Europe, or I have people all over the world that watch this. This is not simply a California story. Explained.
This is happening all over the globe. Again, we have in the western areas of Europe, Spain, Portugal are being subjected to the same sort of conditions we're seeing here in California, massive wildfires in those countries as well. So remember I described the high pressure domes that the climate engineers can create with ionosphere heaters. Important your listeners understand what that is. The ground-based, massively powerful microwave transmitters that can heat the atmosphere and create these high pressure domes spinning clockwise in the northern hemisphere, and that helps them to steer the jet stream where they want it, to divert moisture where they want it. And with enough moisture, like what we've seen on the U.S. East Coast for a very extended period now, with that moisture, They can use patented processes of chemical ice nucleation, materials sprayed into the storm moisture that cause a endothermic, energy-absorbing reaction, chemically creates a cold, dense layer of air that descends to the surface, can turn what should have been a liquid precipitation event, i.e. rain, into a frozen precipitation event, snow. And for your listeners that doubt that this can be done, search this. Chinese scientists create artificial snowstorm. They openly announced they were doing this. The Chinese did. Popular Science and Fox News covered this, Greg. And yet our media now is trying to sweep it under the rug. The Chinese engineering snowstorms over Beijing and other parts of the country. Do we think that our military, that's bigger than the next 10 militaries combined, can't do the same? That's an absurd notion, and they're doing exactly that.
These guys are evil. I mean, do they just want to depopulate the world? Is that what they're doing? Or do they think they're really doing some good here?
Well, you have to look through their lens. For their lens, hiding the severity of what's unfolding from the population, keeping the population from panicking because the situation is so severe, serves their purpose. So looking through their lens, it's for their greater good. It's not for the greater good of the planet or the populations, but you have to look at this through the lens of those in power. And I want to state let me give a statistic, Greg. I've quoted in the past, I quote often, the species extinction rate today. It's 15,000 times the background rate. We're losing 200 to 300 species of plant, animal, and insect a day to extinction. That's 1.5% million of normal. So how soon is our time horizon on the current trajectory? We've lost 60+% of Earth's wildlife populations, 80% of the insect populations. But the wildlife populations, 60% have been lost in the last 40 years. On the current rate of loss, if that rate doesn't increase, and it is increasing, we will be at 0 hour for wildlife. No wildlife left. 2026. 2026. No habitat, no humans. And it is that severe. And again, if we look at the food situation, the fish stocks are collapsing in the oceans, crops are collapsing. Right now in the U.S., we're importing about $41+ billion worth of food annually to keep U.S. store shelves stocked, to keep Americans pacified, clueless as to what's happening around the world until the last possible moment. It is that severe.
And you're getting ready for rain, mudslides. Talk about that.
Well, this is, again, back to the climate engineers controlling the spigot, and they do control the spigot. This is not speculation. The scientific data makes this clear. We can go all the way back to the 60s. Project Popeye in Vietnam, historically documented. They made it rain over the Ho Chi Minh Trail horrifically, and thus to hamper the movement of the opposing force there. So this is decades old, half a century old, the fact that they can control the flow of precipitation with atmospheric aerosols. So now what we have in California, we don't have seasons per se. We go from summer to the rainy season, from 8 months of dry. We used to have 2 to 3 months of dry. Now we have 8 months. And when they turn the spigot on, it tends to come on all at once. So you go from drought to deluge. Now we're going to have mudslides and so forth. And so again, the hydrological cycle is totally disrupted. And Greg, if we look at a satellite image of the planet compared to images that are decades old, the planet looks like a completely different planet. There's no real large clear areas. It's just increasingly scattered with disorganized sun-blocking atmospheric aerosols everywhere. And that's the point of solar radiation management, to block some of the sun's incoming thermal energy with light-scattering particles with no concern as to the downstream consequences.
Boy, I want to read you something. I just want to read you something. This is just such a predictive book. I don't know how religious you are. I am. I'm a Christian. This is Revelation 11:18. The nations were angry. Your wrath has come. The time has come for judging the dead and for rewarding your servants, the prophets, and your people. You might be a prophet, my friend. And your people who revere your name, both great and small. And here it comes. And for those destroying those who destroy the earth. Did you hear that?
I'm familiar with that scripture. You have even
great and small. So the time has come for judging the dead, and I'm going to fast forward, and for destroying those who destroy the earth. How did the Bible know that?
It's certainly interesting.
Is that what's happening? Is that, am I wrong? Is that over the top? Are these people destroying the earth?
Climate engineering operations, and I know this is a big statement I'm about to make, so understand that I'm very familiar with the statistical to say this. Climate engineering, mathematically speaking, is absolutely the single greatest assault ever launched by the human race against the entire web of life, period. And for those involved, Greg, and many people ask several questions. They ask, why would they, those behind climate engineering, why would they do this to themselves? I hear that all the time. Again, I want to answer, how many things have the proverbial they done to themselves already anyway? The detonation of 2,000 plus nuclear weapons, which contaminated everything on the planet. We have Fukushima, that maybe would be a global extinction event by itself if other factors didn't get that done even sooner, and that's the course we're on. And at the same time, we're building 60 more nuke plants. Isn't that what they are doing to themselves? And we could go on and on about what those at the top do, because they're not sane. And that's not a metaphor. We know from psychological study, Greg, those who are in the highest levels of power have various forms of psychosis, the common thread of which, and this is right from the manual, is a near total lack of comprehension as to the consequences even to themselves. That's those at the top. Those carrying out these programs are being told, Greg, that they're doing something for the greater good. Our military members and other aspects within the military, they're being told this is somehow for the greater good, which could be further from the truth. And as an example of that, Greg, do we think that the pilot in Vietnam that was spraying Agent Orange on his fellow soldier on the ground was told this will kill your comrade? No, they weren't told that. But people need to start weighing out the facts before they come to conclusions, and they need to look at the data. And Greg, that's all we try to provide at geoengineeringwatch.org, data, so people can get past the smoke, mirrors, and official lies and understand we're in a fight for life, right here, right now.
Dane Wigington, I just wanted to say, when I first started doing research on you, I went to your site and said, okay, let's see what this guy has. And I mean, it took me weeks. I went over it and over and over. And then since then, it's been years since I've had you on. You've added video and documents and Senate documents and official documents and statistics and scientific papers and whistleblower testimony. I mean, I'm leaving stuff out. Nobody puts this much work together to lie to somebody. I mean, you know, people will come on and say, "Oh, he's full of crap," or he's lying, or that's just moronic. Nobody puts together anybody that doubts how deep your site is. I mean, it's huge. It's like the Library of Congress for geoengineering. There's probably no other single source for geoengineering, high radiation, high altitude radiation management, all the different sciences, which are bona fide sciences. There's probably no, I know I'm going on, but there's probably no better site than geoengineeringwatch.org, and I'll be putting up the links for that. Also, you live and die on donations. Is that right?
It helps us to provide the type of materials that people need to wake others up around them. Very compelling printed materials, which we send out to activists all over the world. So that helps us with that outreach, absolutely. And for those that are busy with denial on this issue, Greg, that denial won't save them. Everything we have said would happen is happening. So for those that have not investigated this issue, I implore you to please do so. That's all we're asking. And we are the largest site in the world on the subject. We're the most visited site on the subject. We're non-political. We're up to almost 32 million visitors. And Greg, as I think I told you off the air, because of the size of our traffic, the statistics dictate that we would be the top of a online search for the term geoengineering. And we were the top on a Google search for geoengineering, top of the first page. Now, in the last month, Google has completely deleted our home page under a search for the term geoengineering. If you search geoengineeringwatch.org, of course, you will find us. But the point is that those that are trying to find out what geoengineering is and search the term geoengineering now cannot find our site because Google has taken us from the top of the first page to completely deleting us from 19 pages of information on the subject. That's how desperately they're trying to hide this issue. They put disinformation now on our own videos. They'll put a disinformation banner at the official false definition of a contrail and underneath our videos to make it look like it's part of our video. That's how desperate they are to hide this issue. And if I could answer that too, that's an important question for your listeners to understand. We are not seeing condensation in our skies. This is not condensation. How do I know that? Because we have film footage of these aircraft up close, which you can see at geoengineeringwatch.org, turning on and off their spray dispersions. You can't turn condensation on and off. We have up close photographs of the nozzles mounted on the pylons on the directly above the engine exhaust jet stream to make this look like, quote, condensation. And we also know that all commercial aircraft and all military tankers are equipped with a high bypass turbofan jet engine. It's a jet-powered fan. 85 to 90% of the air that goes through that engine is not combusted. Those engines are nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under the rarest and most extreme circumstances. So I want to stress that. The condensation trail narrative is perhaps the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the globe. This is not condensation. It is solar radiation management operations.
Dane Wigington, you are the founder of you're doing God's work. You are the founder of geoengineeringwatch.org. You have the as you said, the best site. I would tell you that it was the best site, period. But now you've officially made it the biggest site for the term geoengineering watch, or geoengineering, I should say. You also have a new donations page. I used to have the hardest time putting that up because I'd put up the PayPal link and it would time out. Now you have a page. I'm going to put that up. I'm going to put up links to your site. For those of you on YouTube, go up to the right through and say all links are on USA Watchdog, and you'll look in the after the interview section and before, you'll see geoengineeringwatch.org. There's a ton. You could take up months to go through all the material on that. Months. And the videos and the documents and all that. And also there's a PayPal page which gives you snail mail and also your PayPal link. Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org. Thank you for joining me today for a very important interview about the California wildfires, which is just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. I don't mean to be cute, but the tip of the proverbial iceberg. This is just something that's happening globally, and thank you for focusing our attention on the bigger picture. Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org. Thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you for your voice, helping us to sound the alarm.